Welcome, everybody, to the Albuquerque Journal debate for the Republican candidates for governor. We are really excited to have you all here, and I'm going to let the candidates introduce themselves in a minute in opening statements. First, I just wanted to set some ground rules. This is a closed debate with only a handful of guests from each of the candidates and from those attending, but I would still like to remind the audience to please refrain from clapping or any kind of applause. You'll be able to watch in the auditorium, but no speaking as well, and please be as quiet as possible. This is being live streamed not only to the Albuquerque Journal website, but also on C-SPAN 2, which we're very excited about. The candidates will be allowed up to 90 seconds to respond to questions. A timer will be present, and these are our lovely timers here from the League of Women Voters, and I'll introduce them in a second. A timer is present to alert the candidates and me, the moderator, when the time limit is approaching. Some questions are for all candidates, other questions are for individual candidates. Journal representatives will allow candidates to make 30-second rebuttals in a case-by-case basis. The basis will be determined if one candidate criticizes another during that 90-second answer. Point of privilege. Journal representatives will give a candidate an additional 30 seconds to answer the question on a case-by-case basis if the candidate has evaded or did not answer the question to our satisfaction. We also will allow the candidates to pick one other candidate to ask a question to directly during this debate. That will come after our audience questions. So we welcome those who are watching on the live stream. If you would like to ask questions on YouTube, you can submit them. And you can also submit them to any of the Journal social media. Our esteemed digital editor, Lucas Pierman, who's sitting next to me, will be collecting all of those questions, and we will twice stop during the debate, once about 30 minutes in and once about an hour in, to ask some audience questions, which we're very excited also about that. I'm going to introduce my timekeepers from the League of Women Voters, Starlyn Brown and Jill Crawley. Or actually, no, sorry, it's Linda. My bad. So Starlyn and Linda, we had a last-minute sub. And now I'm going to introduce the reporters on stage. So we have Dan Boyd, who is our Santa Fe bureau chief for the Journal and our chief political reporter, Ryan Battelle, our opinion editor, KOAT's Faith Abuanu, and KKOB's Zoltan Chani Salcedo. Great. And now I'm just say a couple of words about the Democratic side, because those of you might notice that we're having a Republican debate, but we're not having a Democratic debate. That is because on the Democratic field, there are two candidates, Sam Bregman and Deb Haaland. Deb Haaland, who is the frontrunner, has declined to debate with us, unfortunately, which is really too bad. But they have agreed to do town halls. And so, as many of you know, the Journal has been doing a series of town hall meetings with all of the candidates. We've already done two with candidates who are on the stage, Doug Turner and Duke Rodriguez. We'll do a third with former Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hull this coming Monday. So in case you didn't get enough of Mayor Hull today, you get to come back on Monday at 3 p.m. and hear a lot more from him. And we'll have Sam Bregman, who's the district attorney and one of the Democratic candidates, in on May 19th at 5:30 p.m. And then we'll have Deb Haaland come in, who's the former Interior Secretary, on May 22nd, also in the evening. So for anybody who's in Albuquerque, you are welcome to come to these events. They are free and open to the public. You can register on our website. Just go to abqjournal.com, and we would love to see you at any of these town hall meetings. And those also will hopefully also be broadcast by C-SPAN 2, if not live, then broadcast later on as their timing allows for it, or C-SPAN in general, I should say. So that brings me to the opening remarks, and I'm going to start with former Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hull, and I'm just going to explain why we're starting with Mr. Hull. We had a recent Albuquerque Journal poll, and Mr. Hull is in the lead, so we've determined the order by who is in the lead in the polls. So, Mr. Mayor.
Well, good morning, and thank you for hosting this debate. We certainly appreciate our opportunity to introduce ourselves to a broader swath of the public. My name is Greg Hull, former mayor of Rio Rancho. Just recently ended my term there on May 1, and so now we're off to the gubernatorial race. I was the mayor there for 12 years, the longest-serving mayor of Rio Rancho, and before that I was a business owner, owned a packing and shipping business here in Albuquerque. Raised my family here in New Mexico, 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and have just been blessed to live in the state of New Mexico. And it is an honor and a privilege to be here today running for governor. It's a little surreal, I'm not going to lie, to run for governor of my state, but it is an opportunity that I could not pass up to try to make a better future for our children and our grandchildren as we move this state forward. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and listening today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Doug Turner.
So thanks to the Albuquerque Journal and all of the folks from the media outlets here in the state. My name's Doug Turner, and I am from Albuquerque. I am a businessman. I've own a company that does public affairs and communications in about 40 countries around the world. We are headquartered here in New Mexico, and I've spent most of my career here in New Mexico working on public issues that I think matter to the people of this state, ranging from education to natural resources, economic development, fighting crime. I got into this race extremely late, so this is week 16 for me, and it's been very exciting, the trajectory and the momentum that the campaign has built. But I got into this race really because of my children. I have 3 kids, and it is important to me that they leave here, go to college, learn things about the world, and then come back to this amazing state. We have an amazing state. I mean, anyone who's spent any time here, they come and visit and they realize, wow, what a place to live. But we have too many challenges in our state that need to be fixed, ranging from education to crime to taxation. And I'm in this for my children and for your children and for all of our grandchildren. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Good morning. I'm Duke Rodriguez, and if you look up here, I am clearly the only non-politician. I've probably had the longest relationship with New Mexico, 54 years in this state. Grew up in the Silver City area, went to high school in Alamogordo, went to New Mexico State University, proud Aggie. I'm very proud of my life in New Mexico. The state has treated me exceptionally well. I've done Main Street to Wall Street. I've been president of a New York Stock Exchange company. I've had probably the dream life to be a New Mexican, and I've lived what I call the real New Mexican experience. And that means I've lived on Medicaid, food stamps, lived in the housing projects. I'm very proud of all those.
We're having a microphone moment. Do we need to start over again, Brian? Yes. Can you I'm sorry, we're going to reset and start again. So, Mr. Rodriguez.
Hi, I'm Duke Rodriguez. As you can tell, I'm probably the least of a politician up here. I've been in New Mexico for about 54 years, probably had the longest personal relationship with this state. I went to junior high in Silver City, high school in Alamogordo. I'm a proud Aggie from New Mexico State University. I like to tell people about my life so you have context for what I believe and what I understand true to be for New Mexicans. Yes, I've seen what it's like on Medicaid, on food stamps. I lived in the housing projects in Alamogordo. I make no apologies for those things because I think it's shown me a way to do better. I've been treated very well in the Albuquerque market. I was the former Loveless COO. I was the former cabinet secretary under then Governor Gary Johnson. I've reformed Medicaid. I've understood what it takes to manage a food stamps program. I feel very proud. I tell you, I've been in this race now for only 4 months, and it has probably been the most positive thing that I could have done in my life. It's been a pleasure to go around the state. The message I've gotten back from everyone is the same message I've shared, and I'll say it again. New Mexico is not a poor state. We are absolutely a poorly run state. I think we've gone through the worst 8 years of our history, and I am committed, whether it's the issue of health care, whether it's the issue of crime, or the economy. All our top issues are areas I'm very familiar, and I look forward to serving the people of New Mexico.
Thank you so much. The first question is going to come from Dan Boyd.
Good afternoon to the candidates. Thank you all for being here. My question has to do, no Republican in New Mexico has won a statewide race since 2016. What makes you confident things will be different this year, especially with Republicans likely facing national political headwinds? And I think we're going to start with Doug on this question since we started with.
Sorry, I will. Actually, I'm taking a sip. I'll call on you.
All right. Great question. It's a question that I get asked around the state. How are we going to pull this off, when it seems like such a steep climb? And, I am not only encouraged by what I hear from Democrats and independents that, the issues that are important to them are the issues that, quite frankly, are important to Republicans around the state. I mean, there are issues of quality education, public safety. We have families that stick together and work hard. But I'm also encouraged by the history of Republicans actually winning races across this state for decades. If we think back, we had Dave Cargo as our governor, we had Gary Carruthers, we had Gary Johnson, we had Susana Martinez. So, we have a history of winning. I think, the challenges that we face right now in this state are so extreme, and there are issues that have not been fixed for decades, that people of all parties in this state are hopeful that we can elect a Republican who understands the issues, has a clear vision for what we need to do to fix things, and who's willing to work with anybody in the state to get those things done. And I have been that person for my entire professional career, both as a volunteer and in business, and I will be that kind of governor.
Mr. Rodriguez?
I've had a very long relationship with the governors in this state. It's kind of funny, back in time, Gary Carruthers was my student advisor. Gary Johnson actually appointed me as a cabinet secretary. I've seen our administrations flip every 8 years. It's time for it to flip again, and the likelihood is it will flip. The challenge is going to be that the Democrats are clearly going to nominate Deb Haaland. She is going to be their nominee. Sam's run a fine race, but the numbers are clearly not going to work out for him. We need to have a candidate who can actually win in November. That's the bottom line truth. You got 3 fine candidates up here, but only one of them can win in November. Look at the statistics. Look at the math and how it plays out. In this state, thankfully, we have this first time ever semi-open primary. So to all those independents, all you declined to state, you get to vote. You get to walk up to that poll place and ask for a Republican ballot. They now represent 29% of the state's enrollees. Republicans are 31, Democrats are 40. Neither party can win on their own. You can just mathematically look at it this way. We got 40% on the left and 40% on the right, and we're fighting for the hearts and soul of the 20% in the middle. I think I represent that middle. I've lived that New Mexico experience. I'm proud of it. I understand what needs to be addressed. Yes, we all can agree on the top issues. Crime, healthcare is absolutely our largest. The economy, I feel very good.
Mayor Hall.
Thank you. Well, my government experience for the last 12 years has been in the nonpartisan world. Being the mayor of a city in New Mexico, you hold a nonpartisan position. That means you work with everybody across the political spectrum to solve problems on a ground level, to improve quality of life on a ground level. That's working with everybody. I've won 3 campaigns as mayor of Rio Rancho, and as a Republican, I've been one of the highest ranking elected Republicans in the state. And so I've learned through my experience with the Municipal League and being the president of the New Mexico, the chairman of the New Mexico Mayor's Caucus for 8 years, how to work with leaders across the state, legislators, mayors, city councilors, county commissioners, Pueblo leaders, solving problems that are affecting every New Mexican every day. And they are common issues when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to public safety. We're all focused on the same things, and the message resonates across party lines. So I believe I am highly qualified to send a message to our independent voters and our Democrat voters that I can be that change that can bridge the gap.
Next question comes from Journal Opinion Editor Ryan Battelle.
Would you describe yourself as MAGA? Where do you agree and disagree with the president?
We'll start with Mr. Rodriguez.
I am first and foremost a New Mexican. I'm not a big fan of labels. I think they're inappropriate. I think we use them to separate and divide people. We use labels like sanctuary cities and blah, blah, blah. I view myself on the spectrum as being a person who believes in New Mexico, who understands what it is to truly be a New Mexican, what it feels like to deal with everything from wondering where your next meal's coming from to where housing's going to be secured. It's less about MAGA, it's less about Biden or Harris, and it's more about simply doing what's right. I know that may seem too simplistic to folks, but for too long, we have stopped doing what's important to voters, to the public. We wasted their money, we've spent money over and over, and we've asked for no results. I've said it from the very beginning, we have plenty of resources. We just need accountability, transparency, and to be very committed, not to do anything unless it benefits New Mexicans. Make life in New Mexico better, not bitter.
Mayor Hull.
Yes, first and foremost, I am a New Mexican, and that's what I consider myself. When you look at my reputation as being the mayor of Rio Rancho for the last 12 years, my one and only focus has been serving the citizens of Rio Rancho and the citizens of New Mexico. And in my positions on various different boards and commissions, working with mayors across the state, working with different leaders across the state, governors, legislators, listening to the needs of New Mexicans. I put New Mexicans first over labels of any kind. The one that I am proudest of is that New Mexican label. And as your next governor, I'm going to work to make sure that we are working for what is best for New Mexicans across the state, because we've got a lot at stake here. The future of New Mexico is the future of our children. And if we don't focus on the things that are affecting us and impacting us right here, right now, we're setting our children up for failure. And that's not acceptable to me. So first and foremost, I am absolutely New Mexican.
Mr. Turner.
So I actually voted for the president twice, and I have no apologies to make about it. You know, we get a choice in this country. We live in a democracy. I know some people criticize me for saying that, but you know, democracy is messy. And you know, we're currently running right now against a woman, Deb Haaland, who has said she is going to be against every single thing that the president does. And I think that's an irresponsible position for any governor of any state to say. The singular job of a governor in this state is to work with this president or whoever is president to do whatever is best for the people of this state. And I commit to do that.
Sorry, can I just follow up? You said you voted for the president twice. Who did you vote for on his third time?
Well, I voted for him the first time when he ran. No, well, actually, he did run for 3 times. It's all a blur to me. Yes, I voted for him all 3 times.
Okay, got it. All right. The next question comes from our partner, KKOB Zoltan Chani Salcedo. I just want to note that the Albuquerque Journal has a partnership called Partners for Impact with both KKOB, which is the largest radio station in New Mexico, and with KOAT, which is the largest television station, which is why we have these partners on our stage. So Zoltan, take it away.
Thank you. So in an era of rampant spending on both the national and the state levels, would you say that conservatism is dead? I
This
guess
is-
Mayor
Oh,
Hall
sorry.
is the
This-
first.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
This goes to Mayor Hall.
Yeah, I didn't know where we were at the rotation. No, I think it's alive and well. I just think that a lot of spending needs to be reined in. And when you look at my reputation as mayor of Rio Rancho, the balanced budgets that we carried, the growth that we saw, the investments that we saw in our community, that just proves that in New Mexico you can build a strong financial presence, whether it's in a city, a county, or a state. And what we have to look at very carefully are the funds that we're spending, how we're investing them, and making sure that we're holding the various different agencies accountable for the dollars that we do invest, and making sure that we're not allowing a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse to be happening with tax dollars. So that being said, we want to look at every program, make sure that we're getting the best value for the dollar. But I think for the most part, and when I talk to people across the state, whether it's Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, they want to make sure that for the tax dollars they're paying, that they are getting the best value, the best services, and investing in the highest levels of quality of life. That includes public safety, that includes infrastructure, that includes education. All of these things are extremely important. And I don't think New Mexicans are adverse to investing in these areas, but they want to make sure that they're going to get a return on their investment.
Mr. Turner.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Right now, is conservatism dead based on the incredible spending that's going on nationally and statewide?
Yeah, so I agree with Greg. I think conservatism in New Mexico and across the country is alive and well. Spending is sort of a necessary function of government. Spending wisely, certainly in a state like New Mexico that has a budget that's gone from $20 billion or so, or 2 billion when I was working for Gary Johnson back 32 years ago, to 13 billion today, we have to question what kind of money we're spending, where we're spending it. I think there are programs out there that people absolutely need in this state. You know, childcare is one of them, right? I mean, we have people in this state who genuinely need the childcare so they can get into the workforce. However, you know, these are programs that I think ought to be means tested. I think there are plenty of people who can absolutely afford childcare, and they should pay for it. So I think, you know, to Greg's point, we need to be judicious about how we spend our taxpayer dollars. We need to be, you know, wise to ensure that taxpayers are getting the best product and the best service for the best price. And that's the kind of governor I'll be. You know, you review every regulation, figure out what its cost implications are for business, and then you make your decisions based on that.
Mr. Rodriguez.
I got lost in that conversation, but let's be clear. New Mexico is a very conservative state. Our family values, northern New Mexico, southern New Mexico, southeastern, northwestern, northeastern. We are a very conservative state. What we have not been conservative about is our spending. When Susana Martinez was governor, we spent annually about 5.2, 5.3. We're not spending 20 billion, 5.2, 5.3. What's happened recently in the latest administration for the last 4 years with a stagnant population and a stagnant economy, we've doubled it to 11.2, 11.3, something under 11. And that doesn't even account to our spending in Medicaid, because most of that is off balance sheet. The feds give us most of that $11 million we spent on Medicaid. Conservatism is not dead. What is dead is spending. We no longer want to just spend money. We're now asking about investing money, and that's what I've said all along. Quit building programs. Quit touting things like Behavioral Health Trust Fund, Healthcare Affordability Trust Fund, and most recently, the raid with universal child care. Start investing, ask for results, make sure that we get the value for every dollar we spend. We owe taxpayers, we owe our future. Spend properly, invest more appropriately. Thank you very much.
So I just want to encourage audience members who are watching on the live streams, please do ask us questions. You can submit questions on YouTube or on X, really any of our social media channels, and we'd love to be able to ask them. The next question comes from Faith.
Hello, thank you for being here. So the three-legged stool of the Reagan-era fiscal, social, and hot conservatives has been framed. Is it dead?
That now goes to Mr. Turner first.
I don't think it's dead. You know, we live in a large country with 300+ million people, and we have lots of different views. But I think, you know, what we can agree on, certainly as conservatives, and I think more broadly as Americans, you know, are what makes, you know, our country special. You know, we get to come to the polls every year, no matter where we are in the political spectrum. We get to beat each other up, come to these forums. I mean, this must be, you know, forum number 20. And, you know, people have very similar values across this country and across this state. I mean, they do care about the same things. I do think Ronald Reagan, you know, really was the tip of the spear when we look at what America is like. And I kind of remember, you know, his ad, the Morning in America ad, where people, you know, the sprinklers going and the paper boy, you know, dropping and throwing the paper to the house. You know, we have an amazing, amazing nation. You know, we are highly flawed, as are all of our leaders in some way. We are all flawed. But we've got a vision for democracy in this country, and I have a vision for how that plays out here in New Mexico, and I think it's fully aligned with that three-legged stool.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Could you say the question number, please?
Yes. The three-legged stool of the Reagan-era fiscal, social, and hot conservatives has been framed. Do you believe it's dead?
What was the third one?
Hawk conservatives?
Hawk. Got it.
Thank you.
I appreciate the clarification. You know what? I don't think it's dead. I think we, again, back to the issue we earlier raised about labels. I kind of like not having those labels and realize what makes the most common sense. Where should we be emphasizing? Where do we fail? Stop dealing with our problems in isolation. Stop dealing with them as silos. When you talk about it like crime, I've often said the answer people you hear is, we need to spend more on police officers. We just need to hire more. We need to recruit more. I don't think we have that opportunity anymore to look at these fiscal, social, or hawk issues in isolation. The new world requires us to get results, to have accountability and transparency. And that's not been a thing we've had in New Mexico in quite some time. I love this state. I know we are a wealthy state. I know we are capable of doing so much more. I look to every voter to say, hold me accountable, challenge me. You know, one thing I agreed with is that we don't always do everything right. But if you tell us what you want, if you hold us accountable, if you put metrics out there, which is something we fail to do, then you'll see the turnaround that we actually need in this state. I think leadership plays so much, and you've seen it in the last decade, that this state has lacked any kind of real leadership.
Mayor Hull.
Thank you. Well, this plays right into, my resume is that I have a history of all of these things up in Rio Rancho. So no, I don't think it is dead. I think we've lost our way in a lot of areas, and we're trying to find our way back. When you think about it, once again, we're trying to use the government to spin ourselves into prosperity, and we can see that that's just not working. When you have a declining population in the state of New Mexico and you don't have opportunity for our kids, and so they're leaving in droves, and I know it's cliche and we say it a lot that our greatest export is our children, but they get an education, they don't find opportunity, and they leave, whether it's in the medical profession or engineering or just about any type of profession you can think of. They'll get a great education here through one of our colleges and then find those opportunities elsewhere. So when we look at that, we have to remember that government spending does not really translate into economic growth or prosperity. What it does is it puts additional burdens on the individuals that are here. And I think that's what we're trying to find our way back to is where are we spending? Why are we spending? Should we be spending? And are we investing in the right things? And that goes back to those core things of fiscal, social, and hawk conservatism.
Thank you so much. As a reminder, this is the Albuquerque Journal debate amongst the Republican gubernatorial candidates. I'm now going to turn to some questions that we've gotten on social media. So on Facebook, Jason McNichol asks, I'm a Democrat who is looking at possibly voting across the aisle. What do you have to say to us, questioning our choices and the fear of alignment with the current presidential administration? And I'll start with Mr. Rodriguez, I believe is the next.
The challenge becomes having a candidate that can work with both sides. The challenge is not, again, to just assume that everybody has malintentions. I look at our spending right now, and I go, if you're about ready to make this choice, you have to agree that the number one issue you face is healthcare. Number two issue is likely crime in the economy. You want somebody who's lived and experienced all of those. I will tell you, if you choose me, I will be the first healthcare governor we've ever had. I will deal with the billion-dollar losses over the last 3 years at Presbyterian. I will deal with the $500 million losses at UNMH. I will fix crime. I will get you to understand and believe that crime can be dealt with by reducing poverty. Reducing poverty means to improve our economy. You want a candidate who just doesn't stand up and says, I'm going to be a brick wall to the administration. I don't object to creative tension, and you should demand a governor that says, I realize the challenge, I will work with who's there, I will make sure that every dollar you put in our coffers is handled responsibly.
Mayor Hull.
Yes. So first and foremost, I will always align with New Mexican values, and I have a track record that proves that, is working for the citizens of New Mexico to improve quality of life. If elected governor, this current administration will have 2 years, and we will have another administration in 2 years. We don't know who that will be yet, but I'm committed to working with federal administrations to make sure that we get the maximum amount of resources back to our state, we get the maximum amount of benefit for our citizens, and that we are represented in Washington, D.C. To the best interests of our communities. And I believe that's the first and foremost priority when we're working with, doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Independent, or Republican, declined a state. When I talk to people, they're very worried about the things that are happening here in New Mexico. And we need a governor that's going to be focused on our communities and our state. And nobody knows that better than a mayor that has served for 12 years working with communities and understanding the problems that we have inside our communities with crime, with healthcare, with education, and infrastructure. These things hit hard each and every day, and they affect people very, very much the same way. So Democrat, Republican, Independent, we align on so many issues, but the number one thing is we want to live in a state that we can be proud of and prosper in. And I'm going to make sure that as your governor, we're going to work hard to get that done in New Mexico.
Mr. Turner.
So the first thing I would say to the gentleman who asked the question is he better switch to become an independent quickly before it's too late, because you can't just do it, you know, at the last minute. So I advise him to do that. You know, what I have found traveling around the state is that what is missing in New Mexico right now, and I think is one of the reasons why so many people are switching to become independents, is we're missing some balance in our governance in the state. You know, we have had a legislature, aside from 1 year where the House was in Republican hands, where we've had the legislature controlled by a single party for, what, 70, 80 years, could be more. You know, when you have single party rule in the state, or in any environment, you know, you tend to get policies that don't represent everybody in the state. And I think we've lacked that for quite a long time in New Mexico. So I think, you know, when it comes to electing a governor, and you're talking about independence, I think the goal needs to be, you know, are we returning balance to our governance in New Mexico? And I think, you know, that is the case that needs to be made to independence. You know, are we, you know, bringing back that balance that people want so badly? Can we come and work across the aisle on issues that are important to everybody? And that's really my commitment, you know, running for governor, is one, bring back some balance, and number two, work with people in this state, in the legislature, who disagree with me. And I may disagree with them for common solutions.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. The next question comes from Everly Taylor on YouTube. My children can't wait to leave this state because of crime and education. What do you plan to do about this? And I'll give this to Mayor Hull first.
Well, thank you for that question, because my children, 3 of my children and 4 of my grandchildren have left the state. We'd like to see them come back, but when we ask them to come back, they cite that exact thing: is crime, education, opportunity. It's just not here in New Mexico. And the one thing that we really focused on, that I focused on as mayor, is public safety. It has to be paramount, because if people don't feel safe in their communities, if they don't feel safe in their homes, they're going to go someplace where they do feel safe. In our last citizen survey that we did in Rio Rancho, 97% of citizens surveyed said they feel safe in their home during the day in Rio Rancho. We want to bring that safety to every community in the state. I will work with mayors, I will work with councils, I will work with county commissions and Pueblos to make sure that we resource our law enforcement agencies with the resources necessary to provide that safety. I know that we need more sheriff's officers, we need more police officers, and we need more policing across the state, but it needs to be community policing, making sure that we're partnering with the community as we work together to make our community safe. It has to be a partnership, and it can be done, and we've proved it.
Mr. Turner.
So I think the fundamental question here in this state, as we look at today, we look at our history, and we look sort of downrange in the future, is, you know, are we preparing this state for an economy where people can get jobs, an environment where people don't become criminals because they have no other options, an environment where we are educating our children? And I think all of this starts early. New Mexico has had a failing public education system since I got involved in politics. We were 50th when Johnson was governor. We are 50th today. You know, we have allowed our schools to fail our children for decades, and this is irresponsible. Because if we don't stop that, and we don't turn around the state of our public education system, kids fall through the cracks. We have a massive juvenile justice problem, juvenile crime problem, and, you know, juvenile criminals generally grow up to be adult criminals. You know, we have to get control of that, of our education system. We have to end social promotion at the 3rd grade so kids can read. We have to give them the tools that they can succeed in life, and then we have to create a workforce where companies like mine or any other private sector company can come to this state and say, yeah, we've got a population of people who can do things versus a population of people who end up committing crimes and doing things they shouldn't be doing. So it starts there.
Mr. Rodriguez.
You know, I've got 2 granddaughters. One of them just is graduating from high school here in Albuquerque this year, and she's looking at colleges. She's going to go to CU Boulder. And I fear, because Seems like our greatest export now is our young people, and that's a complete failure on us. No one here has created more jobs on this table than I have, and I mean thousands of jobs. I've seen what it takes to make a vibrant economy. Right now we have a stagnant population, a stagnant economy. We can keep talking about the problems and we know what they are. We can always repeat over and over, crime, healthcare, economy. But it gets down to vibrancy of life here. That means more jobs. That means creating a trajectory where people can believe that they have a future here. And we have to stimulate that economy so it happens. We want doctors to stay? Eliminate state personal income tax. Eliminate New Mexico gross receipts tax on retail sales. Reduce property tax on the state's portion. Do everything we can to create a more vibrant, lasting economy. That's what our young people want to see. They want to see opportunities and a future for them. It's real simple.
Next question comes from Dan Boyd, and it goes to Doug Turner first.
There's actually a related question. A recent legislative report found 32,000 New Mexico residents between the ages of 16 to 24 who are not in school or working. What do you read into that trend? And what policies do you support to increase workforce participation rates in general?
Yeah, I think that number reflects a cost to the state in excess of $600 million a year in terms of what the taxpayer pays out in unemployment and other benefits to a non-working group of people. Look, there are some people who just don't want to work. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But most people, I think, actually want a job, and most people want to care for their families and make sure that they can watch Monday Night Football and have a beer, and not worry about where the next meal is coming from. And I think that's a function of creating an economy that provides jobs to people who say don't want to go to college. We need to put more trade education back into our high schools so kids can, move forward in high school and get out of school with marketable skills, whether they want to go into plumbing. And I tell you, plumbing, you can make a fortune in. I mean, what it costs to get something fixed at my house is nuts. We need those. Charter schools are a solution. Charter schools can direct kids into certain professions where they can be passionate about. But ultimately, we need to fix our education system, and we need to have kids who can get jobs when they leave and are productive.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Front page of today's Albuquerque Journal talks about the record spending now budget at APS. We are spending enough money. 25 years ago, we spent about $2.5 billion on education K through 12. This year, we're going to spend $4.3 billion. It might shock your listeners, but the number of students enrolled 25 years ago are flat today. We've grown not at all. Average spending now is about $36,000 per student, and you have to start to wonder why we're failing. We've put the money in the wrong places. We've not emphasized the activity within the classroom. We haven't let teachers teach. We got to realize, remember we took away PE, music, art. We took all those things away, and we wonder why students lose interest. There are different pathways, as my colleagues have pointed out. Vocational. We need to allow them to succeed in their education. We need to give them a pathway that is no longer stagnancy. The more times they have on their hands, crime will result. It shouldn't shock us. If we don't hold the schools accountable, if we don't make our students participate and give them a reason to participate, the outcome will continue to be failure. I keep saying over and over, the solutions are simple. Let's just have accountability and let's measure the results.
Mayor Hall.
Yeah, the report, I read that myself yesterday, 26,000 individuals between 16 and 24 not going to school and not employed. That to me says that there's just a lack of interest or a lack of opportunity, apathy in the workforce. And that goes back to the initial education. When you look at the education system, what are we encouraging our children to be involved in? I know in the Rio Rancho Public School District, we try to get the kids involved in a career path very quickly, very early on, and align with employers that are in the community. We've invested heavily in career technical education, and we've seen this work throughout the state. There are a lot of kids that don't want to go through a four-year college education. They want to get that high school diploma or maybe even a certificate and move into a workforce, a job that they enjoy. I think we've taken a lot of these things out of school. We've just lost interest. I know when I went to high school, We had all kinds of classes that dealt with computer programming and electronics, and we could assemble stuff, and there was shop, and just one different class after another where you could really stimulate your interest in what you might want to do going forward after you got out of high school. But that being said, I just think we need to bring a lot of these programs back to generate interest and generate activity and excitement about what the future holds.
Thanks. The next question comes from Ryan Battelle.
New Mexico's violent crime rates are some of the highest in the country. What, as governor, would you do to address that? And that's to Mr. Rodriguez.
I'm sorry, to Mr. Rodriguez.
I don't want to sound redundant, but I think it's important to emphasize why we have crime in New Mexico. And I realize, we can recruit as many officers as we can. We can pay them the top salaries in the region, and we're still going to have crime. We have to be real honest with ourselves. What's not working? Number one, we have to deal with poverty. As long as this state has high levels of poverty, you will have crime. Poverty means what? A lack of jobs. If people don't have an opportunity to do things, idle hands, obviously you see, poverty will lead to very bad places. We have to be honest about our education system. It's not just poverty alone, but we talked over and over this morning about that failed education system. If we allow poverty to exist with failed education, you get crime. But here's the other two pieces we don't want to talk about. Number three, mental health. When a person's in crisis, we've got to provide intervention. Not ignore the problem, but recognize it's real. And finally, a severe problem here, when you travel up and down Central Boulevard, addiction. Poverty, education, mental health, and addiction. Deal with those issues, and violent crime will decrease in this state.
Mayor Hall.
We have a revolving door justice system, a lot of high recidivism rate on a lot of these violent criminals. And I think we need a judicial system that holds these criminals accountable. Moving to mandatory sentencing and stop some of the flexible sentencing that we see happening throughout the state. I will tell you, as a mayor, I experienced this head-on in my first year, in my first administration, where there was a repeat offender that was released and was turned out onto the streets. And he made his way up into my city and murdered one of my police officers, and it devastated my community. And that's because he wasn't being held accountable. And until we start holding these criminals accountable and showing them that we're actually going to enforce the law, that we're actually going to enforce punishments and penalties, they're going to continue to believe that they're going to get away with it. And they're just going to do what they want to do. So we've got to move to more mandatory sentencing, especially for violent crimes. And we've got to move to a place where not just government, not just our leaders, but our citizens say, we have zero tolerance for this. We can't let our kids go to the park alone anymore. We can't let our kids be out on the street and play stickball. I remember playing in my neighborhoods. It was a different time, a different day. And I know that's being nostalgic, but we just don't have that anymore because we're so worried about what's going to happen. And that's because we're not holding criminals accountable. So we've got to start there.
Mr. Turner.
Gosh, what else is there to say? I agree we have to do something about this revolving door that we have in the state. I think that's a result of, the 2016 Bail Reform Act passed by the voters of New Mexico, which made it, easier for judges just to put people back out on the street. So if you travel anywhere in this state, anywhere, and you talk to law enforcement, they will tell you that their biggest annoyance is having to arrest the same people over and over and over again. That doesn't mean there's not a continually growing population of criminals, but that is a serious issue that we need to address. It's going to require the legislature, and it's going to require putting something back to the voters to make a substantive change in the law in the state. I will also say, that we do have to rebuild our mental health system. I mean, it was dismantled in the state maybe 10 years ago. It has created a problem in serving homelessness. It's created a problem, in dealing with, people who do conduct or commit crime. I've never believed someone who says we need higher penalties or longer penalties, because I really doubt that most criminals are thinking that they're ever going to get caught. So, making a mandatory sentence may be great, but closing the loopholes that keep people out of jail is really where we need to start.
Mr. Rodriguez.
He started.
Oh, sorry, he started.
Do it again.
Next question comes from Zoltan, and we'll go to Mayor Hall to answer first.
Right, we're kind of switching here on themes for sure. Do you support Blackstone Infrastructure's purchase of TXNM, which is the parent company of PNM? And if you do, why? And if you don't, why not?
Well, let me be very clear that when it comes to an outside company purchasing a New Mexico company, I think you have to be very careful and you have to watch that purchase very closely to make sure that if that purchase does happen, that it is in the absolute best interest of the citizens of New Mexico. I have concerns about Blackstone as a company. I've read a lot of different things there, but I've had concerns with other companies that have tried to acquire, companies here in New Mexico as well. And it's going to be something that's going to take a lot of time, a lot of consideration to make sure that if this transaction is to happen, that New Mexican citizens do benefit from any type of transfer in this with these two companies. Companies change hands all the time, and you can find many things wrong with any particular company. And you can find many things wrong with any particular leader in those companies. But at the end of the day, what you have to make sure is through the agreements and through the the purchase terms, that New Mexicans are not adversely impacted by the transaction and that we will continue to have clean, reliable, and sustainable energy moving into the future.
Mr. Turner.
We have had utilities in the state owned by outside companies for decades, private equity, external investors. The gas company of New Mexico has changed hands maybe 5 times in the last 15 years. And every time it's changed hands, there's actually been an improvement of service. So, these utilities are regulated by the PRC. They will be regulated even if Blackstone, makes its acquisition. So I actually support that. And I support, other instances where major corporations in the state have been acquired. I do agree with the mayor, that we need to be sure that New Mexico interests are protected. But the reality is that we just don't have the scale of of investment in the state to do what's needed to protect the infrastructure, expand it, and provide good services to New Mexicans. So we need to go outside the state, and I think this is a good deal for New Mexicans. Blackstone is a fiduciary of billions and billions of dollars, and it has an interest to its own investors to make sure that the assets that it acquires are profitable. And I think it's going to go through. I think it's good for the state, and that's it.
Mr. Rodriguez.
I've said this from the very beginning, and I think it ties it together. New Mexico is not a poor state. We are absolutely a poorly run state. And this Blackstone transaction is a perfect example. We generally don't have the horsepower and the brain power to do what is right in those negotiations. When I say we as New Mexicans, we are the weak sister in that relationship. Having Blackstone consider buying that shows you that we have a valuable asset. It's our duty to extract the most value out of that. It's important that we get the most value. I correlate your question to Project Jupiter, making sure it's the right deal. Just do not villainize that they have the worst interests of the state. Make sure it's a fair deal for our people. Demand concessions in those deals. If you're going to do X, tell me how many jobs you're going to create here. If you're going to purchase Y, show me what you're going to invest back in the state. Don't just take resources. Don't just take water or electric from me. Show me how it's going to be accretive to the New Mexicans, not dilutive. We're not good at that. And the nice thing about me, I'm the only candidate up here who's done Main Street and done Wall Street. I've run a publicly traded company successfully, and I'll make these deals work for New Mexicans.
Thanks. The next question comes from Faith, and we'll go to Mr. Turner to start.
New Mexico has one of the highest poverty rates in the nation. With the rising cost of gasoline, affordability has gotten worse for many. What are your plans to help New Mexicans make ends meet?
So you raise a great point, and it's something I've actually been thinking about quite a bit lately with the rising cost of gasoline. The first thing, that I think we need to realize with respect to fuel prices is that the legislature recently added a 21-cent per gallon tax on top of the taxes that we already pay for fuel. And with the war in Iran right now, the state has earned an additional $320 million in revenue off of the price of oil. As the price of oil rises, the amount of money that the state earns from that rises as well. I actually think we ought to have a tax holiday, a gas tax holiday for the people of New Mexico until the price of gas levels out to $3.50, $3.30, whatever the pre-war price is. We have the cash to do it since taxpayers are already paying for it at the pump, and I think that's something we ought to be doing. Regarding poverty, you're not wrong. But we have some of the most regressive gross receipts taxes in the nation here. We're 8th highest tax burden state in the United States. So we can work to eliminate our gross receipts tax and make it more palatable, for people who can least afford to pay it.
Mr. Rodriguez.
I want to go way beyond a tax holiday. I want to go to a tax elimination. If you are committed to helping New Mexico families, to making things more affordable, it means very simply putting more money back in their pockets. And that's not about one-time checks. That's making sure that it's less expensive at the gas pump, their cell phone, their groceries, which we addressed, and everyday purchases. That's why I advocate put more money back into people's pocket. Don't allow health insurance policies to be issued with $5,000 and $10,000 deductibles. The governor has the ability to influence those policies. Limit gross receipts tax by eliminating it on all retail sales. That immediately puts money back in New Mexico's families' pockets. Rely on every year. Imagine how every New Mexican would feel today if they never had to fill out another state personal income tax return. Lower their property tax. Quit talking about playing around the pretty edges that are politically satisfying. Do the things that put money back in their pocket every day, every week, when they can see it, instead of waiting for, am I going to get a check this year?
Mayor Hall.
Yes, responsible tax reform is the best way to put money back into people's pockets, and I think the low-hanging fruit in New Mexico is the New Mexico income tax. I think that's something that other states have figured out how to eliminate, and it's the quickest way to keep money in people's pockets by not deducting it from their checks. People work hard for their money, and when you look at the various different taxing entities throughout the state, whether it's personal income tax, gross receipts tax, or property tax, the least complicated of all of those is the personal income tax. The other two get very complicated because they tie into local municipal operations, they tie into school district funding, they tie into a lot of different things that when you go to reform those, there has to be a very thoughtful way that you take an approach to those things, not just a slice and dice and throw, cut and hope that it works out. As a mayor, I've seen this through hold harmless with the gross receipts tax and how it's impacted the revenues of cities. And when those revenues are taken away, it's impossible to appropriately pay your police and firefighters. So you want to make sure that you're not compromising public safety, compromising services. So in this particular case, putting money back into people's pockets. Now, with the windfall that we're seeing from the oil and gas revenue because of the inflated prices and the price of a barrel of oil, I believe that looking at how we can invest that in a way that helps lower costs for New Mexicans, it is a windfall. It is New Mexicans' money. So let's see how we put it to work.
Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Thank you.
The next section is questions directly for the candidates, just individualized questions. If other candidates want to weigh in on this, please raise your hand. We'll allow one 30-second rebuttal or addressing of this question if you would like to. The first question is going to go to Mayor Hull from Dan Boyd.
Mayor, Rio Rancho has faced lawsuits and scrutiny over press freedom and public records during your tenure as mayor. Would you pledge as governor to be transparent and give press more access than you did in Rio Rancho?
Absolutely. And let me make this very clear. Some of the records requests that we were dealing with in Rio Rancho dealt with children, and we needed clarity from the sunshine laws and the transparency laws. We had some severe conflicts, and we were actually quite happy that when those court cases were resolved, we had clarity. when it came to releasing documents that involved children, especially children that had been involved in violent crimes. So I'm always committed to transparency, but there was the one thing you have to look at when you're releasing these documents, that you're not putting families at risk, you're not putting children at risk, and you're not putting information out there that could potentially get the city sued as well. So once we got the clarity in that lawsuit, we did not appeal it because we needed a court ruling that said, this is what this means, now proceed. And as soon as we had that court ruling, we moved forward and released all the documents under the protection of the court.
Do you want to weigh in, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, if anyone up here has had a track record of transparency, I've sued the Secretary of State, I've sued the governor, I've sued other legislative leaders about IPRAs. And the fact is, we've got to let every opportunity to release those records, every time. Most recently, the governor exercised an executive privilege. As governor, I won't do that. The fact is, I believe a governor has to be as open as possible and have actually greater access to information.
The next question is for Mr. Turner, and it is also from Dan.
I guess I get to go again. Doug, your company has landed multiple state contracts, including helping implement an incentive program for individuals who got the COVID-19 vaccine. Sure. What should kind of voters read into that, and should they read into that as support for the current governor's handling of the pandemic?
Sure. So, our company is the only company in the state that has what's called the statewide purchasing agreement. So it is effectively the state's ability to buy off our federal schedule for federal dollars. So the monies that you're referring to, in one of those campaigns, was federal funds, and funds to distribute vaccines developed by President Trump's Project Warp Speed. So if you are not into vaccines, that's your jam. But it was incumbent on the state using the federal money to incentivize New Mexicans to get the COVID vaccine, and that's what we were required to do. Prior to that, the state was actually incentivizing people with Best Buy gift cards and cash, which we felt was a recipe for fraud. We worked with the state to come up with a technological solution that our company developed to make that happen without fraud, and to guarantee that the people who were being incentivized to get the vaccine actually got it.
All right, the last question is for Mr. Rodriguez, and it comes from Ryan Patel.
We have a question about your residency. If you care so much for New Mexico, why did you vote in Arizona for decades? And if you paid income tax in Arizona, would you consider paying back taxes to New Mexico?
Taxes are based on an apportionment of income, and there's actually IRS and state code that you must follow. That's what I do. When it comes to where a person resides, this whole issue has been nothing more than a real political stunt. And it's created enough interesting conversation about, oh my God, Duke has a home in Scottsdale. I've never denied that. Our Constitution is very specific, and without spending a full 2 minutes, it basically never talks about where you vote, where you have breakfast, where you have lunch. It's about where you reside, where you continuously reside, and also as to the intent. When the Constitution was written, we did not have registered voters. So everything I've done is exactly in accordance with the Constitution. What's fascinating is the media wants you to focus on what Duke does, and yet my main opponent in this general election will be Deb Haaland. You should ask the same question, hold the same standard. Where did she in fact reside for the last 5 years? I'm pretty certain, whether it comes to Deb Haaland or these individuals here, no one has been more productive and more committed and spent more time in this state than me.
Can I just follow up on that, on the income taxes? Because that determines your homestead, where your main residents are. And if you pay income taxes in another state, that means you're telling that state that your main residence is in that state. So have you paid any income taxes to Arizona in the last 5 years?
I've absolutely paid taxes in multiple states, not just 2. And again, they're driven directly by code. And there's an apportionment of income. That's a pretty straightforward mathematical calculation.
But the calculation again is homestead. In which state did you homestead? You can only homestead in one state.
I think you're wrong. If you want to debate it, there's a difference between homestead, between every category of where you reside, domicile, you're really getting technical in something that's not necessarily correct.
The next segment is allowing each of the candidates to ask questions of the other candidates. You'll be able to ask one question of one of your opponents, and we're going to start with Mr. Rodriguez. Who would you like to question?
I think today we will try Doug. No, Greg. Doug got too excited, so we'll go with Greg. Greg, there's obviously been a lot of discussion around universal child care. To give you some context, it's potentially, I can explain it, but I won't take up your time in the question, its relationship to our SNAP program, our relationship to Medicaid program. It could become, very likely, the single largest state social program burden, larger than Medicaid, larger than SNAP state's portion combined. The governor is very offended that I sued her. How do you feel, how do you interpret that suit, and where do you stand, and what's legal and what's not legal? Please explain your position on universal child care, not generically, as to the litigation.
No, I think litigation, as it pertains, you always drill down to find out what is legal, what isn't legal. That's what litigation is there for. Ultimately, when it comes right down to universal child care, I think we have to look at that program very closely, very closely. Because right now, the way it's structured, I've described this very publicly. It looks like we snapped a football without any receivers downfield. There's a lot of infrastructure that's not in place. There's a lot of costs that haven't been identified. There are individuals that I believe should benefit from child care, but should it be universal? No, I've never agreed with that. There are individuals that I know that are making well over $300,000 a year right now that are receiving the benefits before other moms and dads, single moms, single dads, are receiving those benefits because they're not in a daycare that qualifies for those funds. And I think that's inappropriate. I think that we should serve the neediest individuals first and then work our way up. So in the end, another big problem I had with universal child care was Senate Bill 96 that preempted local licensing of daycares. And moved that licensing to the state and took it away from local fire marshals and code enforcement agencies. That's a recipe for disaster when you have 7 or 8 kids in a house and your fire marshal doesn't know they're there. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at very closely. And as president of the Municipal League, I fought the preemption bill of 96, Senate Bill 96.
Thanks. All right. The next question goes to Mayor Hull. So who are you going to talk to?
To be quite frank, Jay, I don't have a question for either candidates because my focus is on serving the citizens of New Mexico and meeting their needs and talking about the concerns that they have. New Mexico has so many issues facing New Mexicans right now: universal child care, health care, crime, economic opportunity, infrastructure. I mean, the list goes on on things that New Mexicans are very concerned about. And I would rather spend my time talking more to New Mexicans than asking my opponents any questions. Because when you sit and listen to us talk, we really have a lot of the same priorities. We really have a lot of the same alignments. And that is serve the citizens of New Mexico. And as the next governor of New Mexico, I believe that I am very well qualified to lead this state forward.
Okay, well, Mr. Turner, do you have any questions for your rivals?
Well, I'm going to ask Greg a question, but it's really not mine. And sorry, Greg, you are the target because you're the front runner in the Albuquerque Journal poll.
Right.
But, a question that, I get asked a lot traveling around the state. I mean, this is a Republican primary, and they ask where you are with respect to the president. Mm-hmm. And some of the questions from the panel this evening or whatever time this is airing, have alluded to that. So the question that people have asked me is, why did you, refuse to sign the endorsement for the president when he came to Rio Rancho for his big campaign rally?
Yeah, that's an easy one because I was the duly elected mayor of Rio Rancho and felt that it was my privilege and my honor as the elected mayor of Rio Rancho to be able to welcome the president of the United States to my city without signing a document. We were already rolling out the red carpet. We were providing high-level security. We were making sure that that the venue was as safe as it could possibly be. We went to the length of removing rocks this big and smaller from all over city center to make sure that we didn't have any type of incident there. And when the president left, we had 2 arrests at the event. It was nowhere near like what happened at the Albuquerque event. It was a complete and total success. Nobody was hurt, and when everybody came away, Rio Rancho was recognized nationally as hosting the President of the United States and having an amazing event.
Thank you.
All right. As a reminder, this is the Albuquerque Journal debate of the Republican gubernatorial candidates. If you would like to submit questions, you can go onto any of the Albuquerque Journal social media sites and submit those questions. We're now going to turn to some of those questions. T. Armijo on YouTube asks, please ask the candidates if they agree with the more stringent verification requirements being imposed on SNAP. And I believe this now goes to Mayor Hull first.
I absolutely agree with more stringent requirements on verification to make sure that the individuals that are intended to get benefits get those benefits. And if there are people that are not supposed to be receiving those benefits, those individuals should be removed from getting those benefits. We have to serve the neediest of our population. SNAP was never designed to be a way of life. It was designed to be an instrument to help people out of a difficult situation and move them into a better place where they would have the opportunity to be successful. We've seen too many people create a way of life off of SNAP. And so, and we've seen people that have started on SNAP, improve their life, and then stay on SNAP. And I don't think that that helps other people that are coming up the pipeline that might need that. So yes, I do support more stringent requirements in SNAP verification, making sure that the neediest of our individuals are receiving those benefits.
Mr. Turner.
Yeah, I agree with Greg. I mean, you know, there are deep needs in the state. You know, we do have a lot of people who can't afford most of the things in their lives, and I think we, as a citizens and a community, should be helping them. But you know, I tend to, you know, believe in sort of the old school Republican mantra that people need a hand up rather than a handout, and I think more stringent requirements are absolutely necessary. There is abuse that takes place in most public programs. And some of it's wildly intentional and bad, and it hurts people who need benefits the most. But some is just because the system is loose and weak. And so I think, you know, one of the jobs of the next governor is to ensure that we tighten those requirements and make sure that the people who really need the benefits get the benefits.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Just to give some context, the SNAP program is fully funded by the feds. They send us about $110 million a month, about just over $1 billion a year, 100% federal funds. But they want accountability from us, and we have the highest error rate, one of the highest error rates in the country. We have to bring that error rate down. I've always said from the very beginning, by the way, I'm the only person up here who's actually run that program and sat there as a cabinet secretary. We have to run that program so, bottom line, we give the right benefit to the right people, and get this, in the right amount. It's making sure that those in need get what they need. Make sure that the safety net survives so that families can have it when it's there, and actually, again, in the right amount. Rather than have possibly in our system, based upon just the error rate being extrapolated, versus having $150 million in fraud, waste, and abuse, because it's wrong, drive the resources to the right people, making sure it's protected, making sure we optimize it, making sure that we use the benefit for the right foods. Right now, our systems do not communicate between Medicaid enrollment and SNAP program. I want to bring technology forward that makes it even easier but more honest that we give the beneficiaries the right benefit. Be fair both directions.
The next question comes from today. The next question comes from Zach Anaya from YouTube, and he asks, how will you protect oil and gas jobs from overregulation while cutting taxes and red tape to help small businesses and tech companies grow in New Mexico? And the first answer goes to, I believe, Mayor Hall.
Oh, yes. So absolutely, yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It goes to Mr. Rodriguez.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Whatever you want.
I think it was me, but it's okay.
Okay, it goes to Mr. Turner.
All right. Look, I mean, oil and gas is it is the goose that lays the golden egg here for the state of New Mexico. I mean, we have the second largest production in the United States. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's already kicked in $320 million extra dollars in revenue for the state in the last 3 months. And it is the lead reason why we're sitting on the largest, or the second largest effective sovereign wealth fund of any state in the United States, with $72 billion. So, you know, we have to have sound regulatory environment, a regulatory environment that doesn't punish the entire industry for a few bad actors. And I think, you know, we need to be paying attention to, you know, all the environmental impacts that this industry has, but I think it's reasonable. You know, from a small business perspective, I'm a small business, and you know, we have a tendency in New Mexico, and our economic developers look for these sort of unicorn companies that are going to come into the state, and they're going to create 5,000 jobs in Intel. Usually that doesn't happen. You know, even with Project Jupiter, you're only going to end up with 200 or 300 jobs. I think the state needs to be more aggressive in supporting small businesses. If we have 10,000 small businesses, and each of them can hire one person, that's 10,000 jobs. It's real economic development. But our local and state economic developers don't focus on the little guy, they focus on the big guy, and that needs to change.
Mr. Rodriguez.
In this state, we have 4 major industries. Healthcare, I could spend a lot of time talking, which I won't do it. We've got national security. We are a powerhouse in national security. We shouldn't apologize for it, whether it's National Sandia Labs, Los Alamos Labs, White Sands Missile Range, or other bases. We are a powerhouse. Also, our third one would be, for example, agriculture. We are a powerhouse in agriculture. But the one I want to focus on right now is oil and gas. We are a powerhouse in oil and gas. As you heard, we are the second largest producer of oil and gas. But it's not enough to just say we extract it without committing back to that powerhouse that we control. It's ours to control. It is our state, regardless of what Texas may think, it's ours. And thus we should invest in that infrastructure, create more jobs, more than just say drill, baby, drill. Do more, put more infrastructure. I want to put a new energy secretary in southeastern New Mexico, not in Santa Fe. Someone who's based in Lee County or Chavez County or Eddy County. We need to drive our resources and realize we've got this thoroughbred here, and we need to ride it as well and as impressively and proudly as we can.
Mayor Hall.
Yes, I absolutely 100% support the oil and gas industry in the state of New Mexico. And right now, if you look at the regulations that are currently on oil and gas in the state, we produce the cleanest barrel of oil in the world, pretty much. And it's because we have enough regulation, we have enough controls on the oil and gas industry, and we should be the energy capital of the United States here in New Mexico. We have the resources, we have the ability. I mean, you look at the different energy sources that we have, aside from oil and gas, we should be diversifying into so many other things, such as nuclear energy, to make sure that we're supplying enough energy for the state. But we can get into energy policy for a long, long time. But back to the oil and gas industry is, I would not support additional regulations. It would put additional burdens on them. And look, just the impact of this industry, we're seeing it right now. Yes, we're seeing a spike in gasoline prices, but we're also seeing a spike in state revenues. Those revenues can be invested back in the citizens. Those revenues can be invested back in infrastructure. We should be investing back in southeastern New Mexico, where all the roads are torn up and the money has not been spent down there. We need to put an oil change in the engine from time to time and help that area. But that being said, the oil and gas industry should be supported and sustained in the state of New Mexico because it sustains New Mexico.
The next question comes from Childish Brandino on YouTube, and we'll go to Mr. Rodriguez first. The question is, what is your stance on expanding safe haven baby boxes across New Mexico? What do you think of proposals that would protect the information of mothers who wish to use them?
I am in full support. Expansion, support, anything that we can do to improve the health of babies, the well-being of our children. Too often we have wrongfully prioritized ending life, preventing life, not giving families the resources to have that great start. I've said over and over and over again, It's about priorities, whether it's safety boxes, safe places, providing healthcare, prenatal care, making sure every resource is given in that very early stage. It is no secret. The sooner we provide protection and care and investment in those children, the best opportunity for them to have a healthy start. I would do anything and everything to finally change the direction of this state to realize our failures and our sins of the past, particularly with CYFD, does not represent who we are. We are a state that's very proud of taking care of our people, and we should now, going forward, should demonstrate that care and concern in every way possible.
Mayor Hall.
Yes, so I absolutely support the safe haven baby boxes. As a matter of fact, in the last 60-day legislative session, there was legislation that was being advanced to try to bring the privacy laws up to speed with the rules and regulations that are found in the safe haven baby box laws, or their contract, if you will. Their contract requires absolute anonymity, but we have a Native American population that requires disclosure when there's a Native American baby surrendered. So that legislation failed to make it through the House and the Senate, and it did not make it to the governor's desk for signature. So bringing the legislation in line to protect privacy is paramount. I'm very proud of the fact, though, that every fire station, every police station, and every hospital in Rio Rancho is a safe haven surrender location where any individual can take a baby safely to any one of those facilities and surrender it safely to make sure, and the mother does not have to give any information to hand that child off. So I absolutely support the boxes, but paramount and first is making sure that all of the things that we're doing are in compliance with laws that not only respect the state's laws, but the sovereign nation's laws.
Mr. Turner.
So absolutely, I support expansion of that program. It's interesting because earlier in the year and last year, our firm was looking at doing some work for the organization to sort of come up with these boxes. And what we learned is that while they're out there, the state and local governments have put almost no money into making people aware that they're out there. It's similar to the conversation we had earlier about independents knowing that they can actually vote. I run in independents and they have no idea that they can vote in this coming election. So with regard to the baby boxes, we need to communicate with our target audiences, the public who might eventually use them, and we just don't. It doesn't take much to build a campaign like that, but that's certainly something that the state needs to lead on.
Final question from the audience from Daniel Strickland on YouTube. How would you eliminate the gross receipt taxes, but then still fund the overall short fund that would ensue? And this would go to Mayor Hall to start.
So first off, the gross receipts tax needs to be reformed, and as a mayor, I understand exactly how important that source of revenue is to cities. When you look at Rio Rancho's budget of reoccurring expenses, I think a little over $100 million right now, and 60% of that budget comes from local option gross receipts tax. That gross receipts tax funds our local college through the higher ed gross receipts tax that's attached to it, and it is the primary source. And when you think about that, one of the things you have to consider is with that type of revenue being 60% of the budget, and then your police and fire, your public safety budget is 54% of your budget. Eliminating that has to be done in a way where you have to figure out how to help communities replace that revenue. You can't just take it away and say we can just be gone with it. Mayors across the state will go into full-blown panic because we're not going to have the money to actually fund our senior centers, our libraries, our police departments, our fire departments. We won't be able to purchase fire trucks. Also, many communities have used these as issued revenue bonds against their gross receipts revenues. And the state cannot interfere in the performance of a contract when there's a revenue bond issued. So this is going to have to be very carefully taken and step by step. Gross receipts tax reform is something that is critical as we move forward to make sure that we are as business friendly and competitive with other states as possible.
Mr. Turner.
Yeah. So I agree, and you talk to mayors, county commissioners around the state, and they say, well, where does that come from? And most of the revenue that is earned, to support these small communities comes from, portions of the gross receipts tax and portions of the property tax. So elimination of those overnight is going to be a massive shock to a lot of places in this state. So it's not something that happens on day one. Absolutely not. I mean, that's an irresponsible approach. Sounds great, but it's just not possible. Bill Richardson actually tried to reduce a lot of these taxes, and he did that on health, on food. So we no longer pay gross receipts tax on food, and the way that was offset was through hold harmless, contracts or clauses between the state and the municipalities, where the state would effectively reimburse the communities for those losses. I've done some back of the napkin, calculations, and that cost could be as much as $2 billion or $3 billion that the state would have to come up with. But we have those resources, and I think this is something that happens, if, when I'm elected, probably slowly over a couple of terms, right? You do a point or half a point at a time, because you have to see how these communities can absorb it and the offset that the state has to offset those funds.
Mr. Rodriguez.
We talk about affordability, and we say we're committed to it, but then we back down. We don't have the courage to do what we can afford to do, what is right, and that is to put money back in New Mexico families' pockets. I've done more than a back-of-the-napkin calculation. I've said very specifically, I support and will remove New Mexico gross receipts tax from retail sales. We don't confuse it with healthcare. That's a provider tax that's there for another reason. This shows you a lack of understanding. The price tag on this thing is about $1.2 to $1.5 billion. We have a surplus now that goes directly into our reserves, closer to $3 to $4 billion. We could actually do it before even talking about cutting services. So it isn't an issue of, if I do this, I give up this. That's not it. It's have the courage to say it belongs to the pockets of New Mexico families, so they can experience and benefit from it every single day. Can we afford it? Absolutely. And again, it's the state portion of New Mexico gross receipts tax. I still say cities and counties should have their local control and local issues. They should face their taxpayers and their voters if their tax locally is too high. You'll still have your fire stations, you'll still have your equipment, but New Mexico families deserve courage, and they deserve money more back in their pocket. Very simple.
All right, I'm now going to ask the candidates to give your closing statements. You're going to get 90 seconds from them. And I would actually like you to just keep in mind one more question from a YouTube watcher, Facebook commentator, Gary Driver. What would you accomplish in your first 100 days, and how would it directly affect the people of New Mexico? So I am going to start with Mr. Turner with the closing arguments.
Wow, great question. I got into this race because I actually have a vision for the state. I have a vision where we improve our public education system, we reduce crime in the state, we improve law enforcement, and create an environment where small businesses like mine and so many of your viewers can actually thrive. That's not where we live today, and it's not where we've lived for 30 years, as long as I've been involved in state politics. But that's a hard thing to do. We have a legislature that has not been supportive of that vision, and it's likely that many of the folks in our legislature may yet be supportive of that vision. So in the first 100 days, I have a vision of completely reforming state procurement code. State procurement code, which benefits small businesses if it's run properly, hasn't been revised since 1984. And I've been on the receiving end of how that works, and it's terrible. I think we immediately implement changes to the charter school laws and allows replication for charter schools. So if you're running a great charter school, you can have another charter school. And I think we immediately start with reforming the 2016 Bail Reform Act. If we're going to look at long-term changes in our criminal justice system, we have to have that constitutional amendment. But more important, my vision as governor is to be an advocate every day, everywhere, for the things that need to happen in this state, not just sitting up in Santa Fe hoping things will happen. We need an advocate, and we haven't had one for a long time.
Mr. Rodriguez.
I've got so many answers for this question because it is very important. What are you going to do first? I've said it from the very beginning, and this should be the context for everything I do. New Mexico is not a poor state. We are absolutely a poorly run state. I hope to prove that that doesn't have to be the way we have to be or defines who we are going forward. We have a whole host of issues. Crime, We've talked about all the components that contribute to crime. We've talked about the other issues with the economy, all the issues related to affordability and making life better in New Mexico, not bitter. But if you force me to choose one thing, you have a crisis in healthcare. We have a collective crisis. You deserve the opportunity to see a doctor sooner and quit putting healthcare at risk. In our rural, in our urban, what we define as our frontier areas, we are a complete failure. Believe me when I tell you, if we don't bring those resources together, if we don't bring Presbyterian to the table, the doctors to the table, UNMH, we will have a greater challenge, will be more difficult to recover from. Healthcare is a priority that will be dealt with on day one. Every other issue will follow. Crime, taxation cuts, all the improvements we're talking about here need to be done in coordination, but we have to realize one bite of the apple, the next bite of the apple, and make life better. Make life better for New Mexicans, not bitter.
Mayor Hall.
Yeah, I think my first priorities are to sit down with the school districts and the superintendents and really work on reforming education in the state of New Mexico. Find and hire a PED secretary that we can keep around for longer than a year or two, and that will really take the reins of our public education system and move it forward. We've seen we've seen what can happen when you have consistency in education, and I'll point once again to Rio Rancho, where our superintendent just retired after 30 plus years of being the only superintendent of the Rio Rancho Public School District. And the excellence that you see that came out of that stability and that consistency. We've got to get to a place in New Mexico where we have that same stability and consistency from the public education department all the way down, helping our local districts, helping our superintendents be successful, because if they're successful, that means our children are going to benefit from that. We shouldn't be moving kids on past the third grade that can't read at a third grade level. That just sets them up for failure long term and feeds into the 26,000 individuals that aren't in the workforce right at this time. So as I move forward, I think education is going to be huge. It's going to be a top priority. And then helping our community solve some of these really critical crime issues that we're seeing throughout the state. So those would be my top priorities going forward. And I just appreciate each and everybody for being here today and for listening in and spending your time with us. My name is Greg Hull, and I would appreciate your support.
Well, thank you so much to all of the candidates who are here today, to Mayor Greg Hull, to Mr. Turner and Mr. Rodriguez. We really appreciate you guys being here. I would just like to say that I wish the Democrats would debate in the same manner in which you guys have debated. It would be nice if we could have some transparency from Deb Haaland in this case, enable us to hear from her in her own mouth beyond just a children's show about what she would do as governor, and ask and hear answer some tough questions, not just from journalists, but also from her opponents. That said, we look forward to having her, hopefully here, if she still will come, to a town hall on May 22nd. We also encourage you to come to our other town halls to see if you want to hear more from Mayor Hull on Monday at 3 p.m. back here at the Journal. And again, we also have Sam Bregman, who's the district attorney, who is another candidate on the Democratic side, here on May 19th. Please do tune into those if you cannot come in person, and you can ask questions, as always, anytime on social media, and we'll collect those questions and ask them as it happens. We really appreciate everyone coming today. Thank you for your time, and this concludes the Republican gubernatorial debate at the Albuquerque Journal.
Thank you.
Thank you.